How have you dealt with sort of feelings of imposter syndrome or insecurity?
It was incredibly intimidating to be at the Times on day one, a place that I've watched like through documentaries, and I watched the Page One documentary, and I've idolized these reporters. To just be in the ranks of them is an incredible honor. I would say the first at least 6 months of the job, I kind of had more of a backstage presence in trying to understand what is a good idea, what is a bad idea, what do people need, kind of taking stock of what people's needs are before you can understand how you can fill them, figure out what my role would be in that environment. Slowly, you kind of just build up credibility. I think it was great that I had a whole 2.5 years at least at NPR and many, many years in student journalism to understand what my skills were before coming to the Times. And I think at that point, I had learned that I was really good at sourcing, finding people's stories, and finding characters whose lives kind of intersect with the breaking news moment or just any kind of news.
It's really important to have an objective, something that you want to get to. And so when I was in college, my objective was I wanted to be known as a first generation student who was incredibly ambitious and was seeking opportunities in business and or marketing. It was about thinking about what are the things that are going to get me there? How am I going to stand out in people's mind, especially with the fact that I was competing against hundreds and thousands of people for the same internship positions. How can I leverage who I am and what I bring to the table via a personal brand? And so what I did was making sure that I was leveraging every single opportunity and resource in order to build a network within business, a network within marketing, and also just not saying no to interesting opportunities. It was about taking really interesting opportunities, building a network, and really being clear on what your end goal is.
I think a lot of people label themselves as bad at math early, which is not good for their later math education, because if you've already labeled yourself as bad at math, you're not going to put in full effort and you're going to think the goal is unattainable. And even if you have set a goal and it's attainable, sometimes you can't achieve it. So you're definitely not going to achieve an unattainable goal. So I would try to explain to students that it's not impossible. And math has this reputation of just being so nebulous. And it's almost like people think you're born with a math ability, but breaking down that insecurity and imposter syndrome is really important.
What really helps me overcome that is positive self-talk to myself and just telling myself I can do it. And I think just the trajectory of my career shows me that I can. As soon as I graduated, I landed 2 jobs, actually, one at UCSF and one at Stanford in a microbiology lab. It was just proof that I'm meant to be in this field. I am meant to be here. I am a good scientist. I am a good student.
What experiences did you face that helped you get more confident in asking for help?
One of the things I realized was that the worst answer you can get is no, right? Or it's not the right time. So when I would reach out to people, I wouldn't put too much pressure on it for them to in my mind. It was more so I'm going to just shoot my shot and see what happens. And if they say no, then I'll just move on to the next. But it is something that is really difficult, I think, for first generation students, because you just, no one else that perhaps has ever reached out to someone cold. But I think you just have to try it. And if you don't try it, then you'll never know what the answer could have been.
One of the hardest decisions I made in college was to not accept my full-time offer in New York, where I think it would have been a safe opportunity to build wealth for a family as well, but to pursue an idea without any customers, without any significant funding, I had to make a decision. And that took a lot of courage, but confidence in myself and my own abilities and not only that, confidence that the problem is still there and the solutions out there are not addressing it at a scalable manner. So I think all that really kind of built my confidence over time, whether it's right or not. Yes, there were times where I may feel regretful because of my lows. When I hit lows, I may think of that negative thought, but I try to be realistic and think about all the things that I've learned, the experience that I've gained, and stay positive.
How do you keep that imagination and creativity alive today?
It's really tough to keep the passion alive sometimes, because once your hobby becomes your job, it's like any other job, and it's very difficult, and you get consistent feedback. And sometimes it takes the passion out of what your hobby used to be and what you liked spending night and day doing. But with that being said, there's always outlets, like work on personal projects. It's like, I don't need to do 100 revisions of this. It's like, I know how it's supposed to look. So I'm just going to make this thing, or I'm going to tell this story. And that's funny enough. It's like my personal work is the thing that has gotten me new jobs over any of the work that I've done in work. Like when I made Elsewhere, that's part of the like a big part of the reason why I got the job at Meta. And it's I'm just going to keep doing that because that's the part of it that's really exciting.
I think it's more of the grit that I developed throughout the years doing something I did not like. And when I started working in music, there were also some parts of it that I did not enjoy. So now that I am doing something that I love, having that grit helps because it makes me want to persevere more and more. And also my habit of kind of just like self-studying when I was in IT helped as well, like learning how to study by myself and kind of just like updating and you know, when working as a creative, sometimes I kind of want to take my time to make sure I give my best efforts and kind of like think about certain creative decisions better.
What have you found most challenging about the job?
Just being able to clearly communicate what you need from others a lot of the time. So for me, like when I have like a given task and a goal, if it's like a clear-cut task, then like that's something that's pretty easy for me to just jump into and start knocking it out and just doing the work. You have to coordinate with other people. You're relying on things coming from them in the right format, and then they're relying on you providing things the way they need it and making sure that like you communicate back and forth how things are going to integrate together.
Sometimes the idea that you have can become something completely different or similar, but not the exact way that you envisioned it. And I think that's okay. It took me a while to come in terms to that. You have to be patient. That's where what I learned from my mom, being patient, resilient, but also don't give up on dreaming big.
I was a zookeeper for 10 years. So my entire 20s, kind of turned 30, and my family on the East Coast, you know, aren't getting any younger. My grandmother did have a bit of a health scare, that kind of a thing, that really kind of makes you stop and think about how you want to spend your time. Animal care is 24/7, ideally. In the decade that I spent as a zookeeper, I had maybe 2 Christmases off. Is one of those things where now that I am older, my body, something that I really value as a zookeeper is doing those more complex enrichments where I was climbing trees. You're doing these things that my body just is starting to get a little more sore when I do them. So it was more kind of age being a factor, family, and just my values of what I want out of a career changing.
As I continued and progressed in the field, I realized that experimenting means that you're going to make mistakes. It means that sometimes things are not going to work. So I had to kind of learn to not be so hard on myself. Experimenting in science is troubleshooting. It was a journey, but I've just learned to embrace it. Sometimes when things don't work, I'm like, okay, I got to just put this down, come take a step away, and maybe come back to this in an hour. But right now it's just, I cannot do it, and that's okay.
What are things you learned during your high school and your college phase that you still use today in your line of work?
I think in high school, and in college, just having the space to play in a kind of semi-professional but professional context really helped me develop this like kind of creative instinct for storytelling. I would just encourage anyone who's interested in, who knows what they might want to do after college, to just do it in school, in a setting where like, you know, you're kind of given a lump of clay and you're just like asked to do what you will with it. And sometimes it's really ugly and really bad, but it's important to like make those mistakes. It's an important outlet to have in a professional setting. I would just encourage anybody who has any instinct for whatever they want to do, whether it's writing or journalism or business or, you know, scientists, like to really play the part of like what they want to do.
As far as like interviewing, it was definitely stressful. And I know I felt like some of the things, like I just felt like I bombed it. Like I walked out, I was like, oh my gosh, they're not even going to let me in. Like I totally bombed that interview. Like they were asking me questions about things I didn't know about. And I did my best effort to kind of answer clearly and, you know, show my problem solving steps when I was given something that I didn't fully understand. I think that's like an important thing that people look at, is because sometimes they'll ask questions that they know you might not know the answer to, and they just want to see how you'll react in that situation where you don't know the answer, but you need to figure something out.
My internship at Morgan Stanley is really interesting. I think one of the main things that I took away from that internship was I learned about ways that I could invest myself. I was a first generation, my parents were immigrants, they had really not much of an idea of how to navigate even the financial system in this country. And just being around people who do that every day, they were able to provide me with really practical tips on how to manage my own money and how to grow wealth, which was really, really impactful.
When you're first starting out, you're going to end up at places where you've got a shoestring budget and a dream, and you just kind of have to figure out how to do what's best on that. But it is one of those jobs that you have to be passionate about.
What areas did you find different support systems, and how did you adapt to different environments?
I did this program in high school called College Track. You're part of a cohort of students, all from diverse backgrounds, and many of them graduated before I did. So I had a chance to see their transition into college and then eventually into the workspace. And I got to ask them a lot of questions about how it is to be a person of color in professional settings. So that helped a lot, just not being shocked by the reality of it, having mentors. And my older brother also was a couple of years ahead of me. So seeing his transition into college and med school was really helpful for me understanding those things.
I say to collect mentors like Pokemon, because I think, at least for me, I used to look at mentors like they know everything, but at the end of the day, they're human beings. One mentor might be in the career field that you want to be in, and have them help you figure out the best journey for you.
I think finding certain mentors, guiding me in understanding why it is the way it is and how we can tackle that, really led to me kind of thinking of different ideas. Over time, I believe that great mentorship from my parents, where they allowed me to explore some of the curiosities I had, found additional resources for me to be able to try things out. I remember my dad just constantly teaching me how to dream big and be determined, while my mom taught me how to be patient and resilient.
I owe a really, really huge part of my career to Tippett Studio. The president of that company at the time, Jules Roman, she chatted with me because she was like part of the board of a scholarship that I was part of in college. And we ended up keeping in contact. And at the time, she ended up offering me a job as a PA. I had some really, really good managers that believed in me, and I'm still in contact with them today. And they were willing to bring me up to a coordinator, which is some of the same work, but also like making sure like everything's flowing internally. And that kind of just taught me what everyone did.
I would also reach out to people who would be willing to kind of teach me. And I think being able to actually ask someone, especially when it comes to, how to get your foot in the door, or like how do you make passive income or stuff like that, I think it would be helpful to ask someone who already is there.
How did you get from this pressure to do a certain thing to being able to follow your own heart?
My mom really instilled in me that I could do anything that I put my mind to, and that I was welcomed in any place, that to not be embarrassed of where I came from, my financial background, being a Black woman, and to just go for it.
I think I really had a huge push from my dad in really just making me think and dream bigger. Pretend that there were no resource constraints. Don't make any excuses. Just move that aside, control what you can control. That plus experiencing the inequities in this world, locally and across the world, has led me to ask why. I think it comes from the exercising of just thinking critically and not being punished for thinking critically, into trying things out and being curious and trying to align your interests with the purpose. And that purpose can change time over time.
I'm pretty self-aware that throughout my whole life, I've been really pressured to do a lot of things because my mom really wants me to try out a lot of things. I don't regret following what my parents wanted me to do because they have the best of intentions as well. I wouldn't change a thing, and I think internally there were so many things that I needed to learn first before going through music full time, such as my insecurities as a composer, and I had to work through that first. And I think the timing was right that I didn't go to music school and all that stuff. Once I went through the whole process of being a composer, learning how to write for film, having recording sessions and all that, I finally decided I really wanted to do it. And I told myself, hey, I have been following what my parents told me to do for the past, years, ever since when I was a kid. And I think at that point I was like, I want to do what I want. I don't want to regret not trying.